She's live at Reagan International Airport for us, where the effects of the travel ban are already being felt. Faran?
Yeah, Manila, saying that airports in Europe are pretty busy today is quite the understatement, because U.S. travelers, they are trying to get back here in the United States before that ban goes into effect tonight at midnight. But then you also have travelers from Europe that had vacations scheduled to come here to the U.S., and they're looking to either reschedule those or cancel them altogether after what the president said last night. All flights from Europe will be canceled except from the United Kingdom and also from Ireland. Now, Homeland Security officials did later clarify that the new restrictions would apply to most foreign nationals. It's been pretty busy again across Europe. And we've even seen some movement here domestically with, we had a high school group here that found out this morning that their news conference was canceled and they had to rush back here to get new flights back home to South Carolina. But across Europe, again, is where we're seeing most of those hard-hit areas. Airlines across the globe are trying to help passengers who are from the United States get home as quickly as possible. And although the statement sounds pretty corny, these airlines are asking passengers to pack their patience.
We are outside the 18th precinct here. This is the closest police station to where Walter Wallace was killed. Protesters literally moments ago just clashed with police. We've seen across the city looting that's happened as far as 1.5 miles all the way to 5 miles away from the city. I talked to business owners earlier today who say that they saw this months ago during the George Floyd protests. However, they never imagined this in their city. One business even saying that they lost a total of $500,000.
That things are starting to get a little more tense there. Describe it for us, Faran.
Yeah, Rick, so we are at 55th and Pine here in front of the 18th precinct. Here we have police in front of barriers, and you can see here there's about a dozen or so protesters here protesting exactly what's going on with what happened with Walter Wallace. Again, the 27-year-old that was shot and killed yesterday around 4 p.m. here in West Philadelphia. Now, Rick, I got to tell you, you've seen me cover the Black Lives Matter protests in D.C. from the very beginning. I got to tell you, there's a little bit of a different sense here. A lot less protesters. A lot of it is because of what we had been talking about earlier, of what people had seen with George Floyd, versus this was a man coming towards police and with a knife. So there's a little bit of a different sense here as far as the size that I've seen, as far as the protests that I've covered so far this year in 2020. But to kind of give you again another background here. So these barriers have been up here all day. We were trying to drive here earlier. So police have obviously known that this was going to be happening, but this is the precinct where actually that is the closest to Walter Wallace's home. While they're still chanting Black Lives Matter and still saying no justice, no peace, a lot of these are more community church groups coming forward and calling for, despite, hearing that there's going to be rioting going on, calling for peace. But again, it all kind of depends upon what part of the city that you're in. Since we arrived here earlier today, things have stayed moderately peaceful. But then, as you saw earlier at 3 o'clock, we were in front of, we were at 52nd and Walnut, where there was lots of looting, lots of rioting, people boarding up their businesses, people trying to clean up the streets.
The 3 cities in central China, they are issuing a travel ban and a lockdown to curb the spread of this deadly disease. Now, because new cases have been popping up outside of China's borders, like including 2 cases now in Hong Kong and the one you mentioned here, they're on a travel lockdown, and authorities in the Chinese capital of Beijing, they've actually taken a big step now, and they have canceled all large-scale Chinese New Year's celebrations in order to curb the spread of the coronavirus. We are right in front of the St. John's Church, where yesterday there was that controversial photo op that President Donald Trump took yesterday. But before we get to that, we have an update now. We have the protesters that have actually moved over to more of the left side outside of the White House, because there has been a National Guard presence more over in the corner. Now, Lafayette Park, which is directly in front of the White House, actually has now been taken over by federal authorities, joined today by members of the Catholic Church, Catholic Diocese, the Episcopalians. You have priests, rabbis, imams, all here. Actually, moments before this broadcast, they were all in a circle praying together, saying that we need to unite. So a lot of religious presence here today. Catholic priests going through and sprinkling holy water on the protesters. It was an hour ago that President Donald Trump was scheduled to speak to everyone, but he didn't take to the podium until about 11:27, where he had a very direct tone. He kind of went through the nuts and bolts of everything that happened within those 2 missile attacks last night, talking about how there were 15 that were fired off and only 11 were actually able to hit their targets, how there were, again, as you just heard on our network, no American casualties. But he also did kind of give note that there was going to be no other missile strikes after this point. And he also called on other countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, France, even calling for the European and NATO to now take a much more involved approach in the Middle East, and also saying that the U.S. is now the #1 producer of oil, therefore the rest of the world doesn't need Middle East oil anymore.
The rally actually officially kicked off at 8 a.m. and as you can see, and you take a look behind me, it's officially over. It was scheduled to go to about 1 p.m. today. And now as far as these new bills that were passed in the Virginia Senate, again, now they go over to the House. It's going to change a lot of the way the gun laws are working right now in Virginia. It's going to allow cities and towns to ban guns from public events. It's also going to have it where Virginia residents, they have to purchase 1 handgun every 30 days. Police also created perimeters. You can see there was fencing along here, keeping people tied to the streets, and you can even see behind me here, there's a little bit of action going on over here. We have one yelling at another and some police. We'll see if this ends up escalating a little bit more, but as far as just this happening literally live on television, gotta love live TV. Before that, we didn't see anything like this.
Congress is debating on the floor behind me right now as to whether President Donald Trump's authority to take any further military action against Iran, along with repealing the 2002 authorization for use of military force, or the AUMF. Now, the vote today, if passed, would force Trump to end hostilities against Iran unless Congress gives that authorization. The Trump administration again justifies the strike that killed General Soleimani by saying that it was needed to prevent an imminent threat.
Protesters started gathering at intersections like this. We're at K and 17th in downtown Washington, D.C., and you can see they're starting to open the lanes up again, but before, that intersection was completely blocked off. And these protesters say that they want to stop all business as usual, all in efforts to promote climate change. Now, as of this afternoon, only 26 people have been arrested, and they've been charged with blocking an intersection, and that's about as serious as the crimes will get right now. But I want you to take a look at this group behind me.
Government regulators didn't find any new safety risks that they didn't already know, but in these emails, it shows kind of these shady interactions between Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration. This is CEO Dennis Muhlenberg's first appearance on Capitol Hill ever since those 2 fatal Boeing 737 MAX crashes. Ironically, it's also the 1-year anniversary of the Lion Air jet crash that killed all 189 souls on board. That is actually one of the biggest questions Tuesday on Capitol Hill. Why is Muhlenberg still a part of Boeing? Well, Texas Senator Ted Cruz says that that's not a government decision, that's a shareholders' decision. Chairman Wicker says that the Senate panel is determined to work with the families to get them the answers they need and also to hold those who are at fault accountable.